Now we're back in the shop and we're eagerly awaiting a day where we won't have to be up on a roof, or we won't have to be cleaning up after Mike or picking him up, taking him to the hospital, sawing his finger off, whatever's going on out there today. Anyway, we have a couple little shop projects that I think you're going to find real interesting. And if we get if they're planning a great day Saturday, we're going to try to get down there and get some test flights. We still have some more prep to do.
Instead I call it.
Now, one of the things I like to do, it's called bench trimming, and that means before I'm going to fly it, I'm going to do a rough check on the bench of several things. First and most important thing, I want to see if the horizontal CG is roughly between 15 and 20% of the mean average chord. I want to check the vertical CG just to see which way we're out, if we're out at all. Again, there's two CGs on a plane, a horizontal CG and a vertical CG. Now, because this is a take-apart plane, I need to check the alignments. And I have a laser aligning tool to do that, which we'll show on the video. Now, what I call this is the extras. These are the extra things I do for a first flight to make it totally safe. For instance, if I take Strega and doing the tip, I'm going to show this up on a storyboard, the tip with the scale underneath it, I know, for instance, that it wound up with 1 3/4 ounce of tip weight. Well, this plane has an extra ½ ounce. It has 2 1/4 ounces of tip weight. Again, extra, just to make sure. These are the little extras that you do. Now, in the case of this, I have about a ½ ounce extra hardware on the front of the plane. I have a steel shaft on the motor, which usually gets replaced by aluminum. But extra, I don't want the plane to be tail heavy. If it's nose heavy, for the first couple of flights, that'll be fine for feeling the plane out. Always, if in doubt, let it be a little nose heavy. Now, for the first couple of flights, I always just crank in a few extra notches of line sweep. In other words, I anticipate the lines will go forward after a few flights, but I want to start with them back, not forward. I define this in my own mind as a big prop. What I don't want to do, later on we can cut props, 11 1/2, 11 3/4, but to start with, I want to start with a full 12-inch 3-blade prop, a full-size prop to start with. Usually I would want to start with the biggest tank. It's only one problem, I don't have it in-house yet. So I'm starting with a 5 1/2 ounce tank. But we're going to be hopefully going to have a carbon fiber tank too. And I don't know how many ounces that's going to be, but as soon as I get started with the plane and we start shaving away the trim. Now, the thing that I'm trying to bring out here is a little common sense in checking these things before you fly the plane. And then one person, no sense mentioning his name because it's not relevant, we went out and flew the plane, and he had me do the test flying, and it was so tail heavy you couldn't fly, you couldn't land the plane. So I just feel like I'll spend the bulk of this day checking these things out. But again, if you go with this little gizmo way I do it, the first flight's not going to be great, but it's going to be safe. And then little by little you can bleed out a 1/4 ounce of tip weight, take out the steel shaft. You can crank the lead outs forward. Try one of your cut down props. And in this case, we don't have the tanks in house yet, but we're just going to start with any tank just to get a couple of flights as soon as we can get to the field. But the whole thing is, there's a philosophy to this, and that is to make the first flight safe. Call this safe trim. And from safe trim, you can work into higher and higher performance, move the CG back. You can fine-tune the vertical CG. Now, I've already done a preliminary vertical CG, and it looks like this plane will need a little bit lighter wheels. The wheel side is a tad heavy by about a 1/4 ounce or so. And I have this laser alignment tool now. I've never used it. I've never even had it out of the box. I ordered it up because I want to try this. Because this is a take-apart plane, I can move things around and change things. And because I want to eventually put a carbon fiber wing in this plane, well, I want to be able to line everything back up. But anyway, safe trim. You can do this all on a bench. And of course, this assumes once this is done, this is only step one. This involves something a little more, well, you can't really do it in the shop. Now, in years gone by, I've done first flights on shorter lines, and basically the last 3 or 4 planes have all trimmed out with full 70 feet to the middle of the plane, the middle of the handle, solid 014 lines. I always have a set of 018 68 foots in case there's some pressing reason I'd want to fly in a pouring rain. Well, to tell you the truth, over the years I've kind of abandoned that whole approach, and if it rains I don't fly. And certainly this model, with the amount of hours I have in it, and what happened even at last year's Nats with the I-beam Spitfire, we got to the 3rd Walker flight, it was raining, and you know, you lose your flight. But I think the benefit of that is, first off, you don't ruin a good model, and I certainly value these models. I want them all to wind up in a Spitfire bedroom eventually. I don't want any of them to wind up in a junk pile. Anyway, I would always start with 70 feet. From this point on, the trim is just a little, I can eliminate a lot of the things. Danny, by the way, started with the same thing. And for a first flight, I would always start with the handle open as wide as it needs to be, as wide as possible. Give myself, again, well, this is for safe, because we know the plane is going to be nose heavy. Now, as we take tail weight out, we can kind of come in, and if we see if the plane needs to turn asymmetrically or if it's symmetrical, again, this is an infinite adjustment that might take hundreds of flights, but for the first flight, I'd like the handle opened up relatively wide. Now, on the plans, of course, on the plans of any plane, should show you one of the most critical things, the CG. Now, the horizontal CG, 15% is about as nose heavy as anybody I know flies a plane, maybe with the exception of 1 or 2 people. And there are a few people I know, if you look at the plans of their plane, they'll show 22 or 25% rearward set CGs. Well, maybe for the super world champion flyers that's true, but most people are going to wind up in a 15 to 20% range, again, to start with, and then you need to feel it out. Now, what happens if you have a 15% CG? You'll probably wind up with a big handle. If you have a 20% or rearward CG or tail heavy, what's going to happen? You're going to want a small handle. Smaller. Also, and this is good information, if you're flying a nose heavy plane, you'll probably want relatively short arms on your handle, or if you have a bar handle, you'll want the bar pulled way up against your knuckles. And I'll just exaggerate this. If you're flying a rearward CG plane, the arms can typically be longer. So that what you see here is an infinite amount of possibilities for trimming the airplane. But you need a place to start. So we'd like to start right in the middle. And in this case, we're lucky because the plane didn't come out tremendously nose heavy or tremendously tail heavy. We don't need to resort to things, drilling holes in the motors or whatever, titanium wheels. But the vertical, the horizontal part of the CG on this plane, good old 38, seemed to be real close. I think we're right at about 16 or 17%, and that's where we're going to put our first flights in. Final thought here. Here's what happens. This plane, as it sits now with the carbon body, is 55 ounces. Now, what happens as a plane gets heavier and heavier, and as you put more and more paint on it, you notice that a much larger percentage of the plane is behind the CG. So what happens is, as a plane gets heavier, I can guarantee you what would happen if this plane were 65 ounces, there would be a lot more chance the CG would be at 22%, or it would be further back, and then we'd be adding nose weight, and then we'd be in this cycle of, oh, now it's 70 ounces or whatever. So I'm kind of glad that it came out on the light side. I'm very glad that the CG wound up real close to where I wanted it to be, or where I had anticipated it should be, based on all the Cardinals and Stragas and Tsunamis that I've already flown. Now, I did just a rough test on the vertical CG, and it looks like I have 2-inch wide wheels. It looks like what it'll probably need is a little bit smaller or lighter wheels to make it perfect, but it's certainly close. But here's the choices you have. If the plane doesn't work out right, exactly right, and of course that's up to how accurate you want it to be. A lot of choices you have. is if you want to make the part that's light heavy. If in our case we wanted to keep these wheels, we'd probably need to add some nose weight or something up here, 1/4 of an ounce, or a heavier prop nut or something to get that to teeter-totter back. Joe Adamusco at one time added a fishing sinker to the tail of his Cardinal right up there to get the vertical CG in. And I feel, now some people don't feel, it's not a universal thing. Some people say, to hell with the vertical CG, just fly the plane. Here's what happens if the vertical CG is wrong, and you live with it. If we live with this, here's what typically happens. Our case, let's just use our case as a thing. The wheels are a little bit heavy. So what's going to tend to happen is as this plane is flying, centrifugal force, which is a very considerable force, is going to tend to do that. And what's going to wind up happening is I'm going to have to answer the phone. Hang on. Back from President Nixonville. What I was trying to explain, because a lot of people miss this, they'll have a plane where the vertical CG is wrong, and because of the weight here, obviously what happens is centrifugal force here at the extra weight tends to, in a very small way, maybe only 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch, but the plane will fly like that. So what they do then is put a flap tweak in. So now the outboard flap is up unnecessarily now. The controls are not both in neutral at the same time. You've got like an asymmetrical control system just to correct what you can correct with the weight. So I'm kind of fussy about trying to get that part of it right before I go on to the next step. I want it to be nose heavy, tail heavy, but I don't want to start tweaking anything or adding tabs until I find out that I've got that part of it, that it's flying straight on the end of the lines. And I'm more fussy than most people are. One final thought too, another way of dealing with an unequal vertical CG is I've tried things like this, like moving the tip weight up in the wing tip, hollowing out the whole tip and putting a tip weight up there so that kind of counteracts it. There's a million other little tricks, but basically this is something you can do at the bench trimming phases. Try to get it right through the center of the wing, and the way that I'm real comfortable doing that is, it's called a Plum Bob method. You need to have a perfectly calm air. There's no air, and you hang the plane from a wire. And here's the fuselage of the plane. Hang it from the lead outs and let it hang perfectly straight. And what you'll see is it'll be off. In my case, it's off just a little bit because the weight is too high. Now you could put some weight here, or you can make this weight less. And the way you check that it's straight is get a thing called a Plumb Bob, which is basically just a cake string. You can use a weight on the end, any kind of weight, it doesn't even matter. And then you sight down the Plumb Bob until you see you have it right. It's relatively easy to do, but it's time consuming. That's why most people skip over that step, and then they wind up with unnecessary flap tweaks and things that are crazy. Either later today or tomorrow we're going to check our laser alignment tool, but what we really want to do is ensure that this one is very difficult or impossible to adjust, because these formers on my take-apart system, that's pretty much what everybody else does. This is kind of my permanent datum that I can't really change. But I can always take the engine and slide a razor blade in on the one side or the other, if I really had to, if that was out. And the tail, of course, because it goes in with compression bolts, I can always put a little shim in the front, a shim in the back, if it turns out the tail is off one way or the other. But most likely, the scenario that's really almost everybody benefits from is if a plane doesn't turn equally, to make sure that the flaps and the elevators are both in neutral at exactly the same time. A lot of time you'll notice this will just be down 1 degree, this will be up 1 degree, well, whatever. Being able to adjust that push rod length so that everything is in neutral at the same time. And once all of these little things are taken care of, we're ready to fly the plane. Now, great to hear Mark Gerber. He's been looking for a Midgley canopy. He finally got the Midgley canopy for his P-47 Thunderbolt. I talk about checkerboards. Look at these beautiful checkerboards. A great rendition. This is using Charlie Parrott's plans. Now, Mark used to live with us in this area, up in Massachusetts somewhere. You just see him at all the contests. Now he's moved to Colorado, and he says, hey, he misses all of us. I'll read his note exactly. Windy. Nah, I better not read it. You'll think I'm making this up. Now, he also passed on this nice photo of Tom McLean's Harold Price Crusader from VSC, I believe. Another little note about how impressed he was with Tom McLean being a nice guy. Well, we're all impressed with Tom McLean. Tom, send us your paycheck. This is one of Mark Gerber's planes that he flew at VSC. It's a Monogram Aranca. Looks like he's got an old 23 in it, too. And I think I could be wrong, but everybody I hear talking about VSC, all they talk about is Al Rave's Bearcat, so I don't know. We didn't even find out who won yet, but we sure found out about Al Rave. And Mark had made a replica. This is his uncle's original. I guess this is the sure, look at the McCoy, an original model. Anyway, that's the cool thing about VSC. Whichever part of this hobby turns you on, go for it. Mark, appreciate the pictures a whole lot. Thank you. There's some pictures in today's mail, too, from Ron Keefe. Now, I got to tell you, he has even outdone me in terms of being cool. I dream about having stuff like this, but look what he did. This is a Strega, obviously. And there's a Cardinal. Now, it's pretty cool to build one of each. Yeah, I have to admit, I like that. And by the way, Ron, if you want to send these for the Spitfire Museum, I'm impressed. I'll have room for them. Anyway, that's only cool. Now check this out. He's got the Strega totally painted. He's got the Cardinal totally painted. He's got the Windy Strega lettering. It's not Windy, it's Tiger DeStefani Strega lettering. Anyway, cool paint job. Ron, I am totally impressed, and I will pass these on to Stunt News. Bet your Strega and Cardinal that match. Matching set. Now, if you remember back on the last video, we got to fly Danny's P-51. He's since sent me some photos I'd like to run by quickly. I don't think there's a person in the world of stunt that isn't rooting for Dan Banjock this year. He is absolutely... I heard all the words back. We had a contest Sunday, and he brought the model to show it off. I couldn't go because I was up on a roof hammering shingles and gutters and whatever. Every single report that I've heard from the contest, everybody loved the plane. Now, this is in Steve DeJulia's shop. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I think this is the poster. I bought Steve a poster. Didn't buy it. They gave it to me for nothing. In England, Steve was doing a Mosquito twin, and I picked that up for him at the what we affectionately call the Al Ray bookstore in England. And yes, he did every checkerboard individually. At the time we're taking these pictures, you have to be the single most happy person and the most popular person in the world of stunt. I'm jealous. These are some of the extra scoops that we had molded and valve covers and things. And one of the things I wanted to do here, because we have another non-flyable work on the roof, and believe me, you can't work on that roof and then go flying. It's out of the question. So I figured as long as, now that I'm showered up, as long as I'm cleaned up here, I could use some of this real thin carbon material to make, I wanted to make the little tail wheel doors. The Mustang has the little doors that open, and this looks like, well, I could put that on the inside. One side has a finish on it already. Now, Al Rabe had his right behind, well, this is a much more scale model, and beside Miss Ashley's a modified Mustang, but anyway, these little doors, I'm just trying to get a sense of proportion here. Yeah, the real Miss Ashley has a H model rudder, much taller rudder, and in essence it makes the back of the fuselage look a lot more slender. I need to, because I need to paint these red, of course. I tried to figure out a good way to hold them because you're going to see basically everything but the lip. So what I did, I took a dowel, put a little cut in it. What I'm going to do is just tack glue these in with one drop of CA. See how that works. President Nixon, you believe this? You can't even make gear doors. No, I'm not sure how I'm going to mount these since they're razor sharp. Maybe I'll put a slit in that. Because this fuselage is all carbon, I can maybe just slit that carbon. I got to think about how I want to mount these. But anyway, I can get the paint drying. And we can just let that dry while we do today's work. After the first coat dried here, I'm trying this 2000 grit just for a test. See how it works on colored Brodak dope. And needless to say, I need to get a coat of clear on this and then let it dry overnight. Another little cute thing I found, and I forgot that I had this. I don't know if this is going to work. I had some very low stick, they call it removable tape, because I don't want to permanently tape the hinge lines at this point in time. What I want to be able to do is take the tape on and off, on and off, on and off, and not either pull up some of the paint or in some way make it more work than it has to be. So I taped up the hinge lines with this relatively temporary tape just to see if it'll last for 1 or 2 flights, because I want to try it with the hinge lines taped and untaped. And obviously one of the things, must need to, is this the old M600? One of the things I want to know is if we're gaining anything with the hinge line tape, losing anything, doesn't pay, pays. See, this is where you really gain with Brodak dope, because in the past you'd have to be waiting overnight for each coat of this stuff to dry. 20 minutes and you're ready to go sand it. Half an hour tops. Now tomorrow these will be ready to mount up. Put these to dry overnight. To try this, I don't have any real high hopes, but because every time I take the flaps on and off the plane, I'm going to have to use some kind of tape. I want to be sure that, well, I'm not... Once I establish that I want to tape the hinge lines taped, then by the time I'm removing fuselages and changing this and because I'm going to be doing it over and over, this might be an option worth having. Again, if it isn't, it'll blow off during a flight and that'll be the end of it. We'll find out. Now this is where I love I love Brodak dope the most, is the next day you're done from a raw piece of material to the clear being dry. You're ready to buff in 1 day, and you can probably do it in less than 1 day if you lived like in Texas or something where it's nice and warm. Light sanding with 1200, a little bit of Gorms. This is going to pop right up, I'm sure. I just want to look for low spots. Obviously what I'll do is take the best side and put it on the outside. You want to get it nice and flat and dull first, of course. As always, look at all this junk in here from buff and aluminum. A little bit of Gorms. A lot of times when you're painting little parts like this, the hardest thing is just to figure out how to hold them. I relate that to machine shop work, where a lot of the jobs, getting the part in the chuck or on a mill, it takes longer than actually doing the job. Figuring out how to hold it without damaging it or destroying it. Yeah, nice and quick, that paint buffs up. It's amazing. Now I got to figure out exactly where I want to put these doors and figure out exactly how I want to attach them. When I broke these off, of course there's a little edge I have to deal with here. Now what I think I'm going to try to do is put some very narrow slits in the fuselage and drop these in so I have kind of a tongue and groove. If I just glue these to the edge, I can almost guarantee they're just going to come out. The first time you wipe the plane off, or the first time one of these bozos appearance points the plane. Bingo. Oh, your tail doors came off. establish first here is, and believe me, putting these little doors in, you think you're just going to glue them in. I would really like to get them really accurate. So I want to establish what would otherwise be called a center line on here. Because even if they're out a little bit, not only that, they might act as little rudders or something. Now I want to see how far off. Obviously they're not going to go up against the tape. Maybe 1/4 of an inch off. Let's see how they would look at 1/4 of an inch. See, that's what's nice about tape. Before you go cutting anything or doing anything, you can kind of lay out all your little projects and center lines and things with tape. Now let's see. Yeah, that looks about right. Now I need to know, let me just get this, I need to know accurately how far forward and back these are going to go. I'm looking at a picture here to see if I can get this accurate. This must be one of these special pens that they make in Czechoslovakia that never write when you're on camera. They never write, period. Let's see, we need it up about so. And what I'm going to try to do is cut a real thin slot right along the edge of this tape, using a tape for a guide. And it's funny, every time you think, oh, these little details don't matter, you find out, oops, they matter. I looked at all Al Rabe's planes, and they all had this little door detail on it. I want to protect the area around where I'm cutting with tape. Now I'm going to assume, because this is a carbon fiber part, the parting wheel will cut relatively neat. There's thin parting wheels and thick ones. We'll try the thin one first, of course. At least the carbon fiber does cut relatively clean. Now notice you always take a climbing cut. Oh, I call it a climbing cut. I'm going from my right to my left. If you're trying to go this way, the tool catches and it goes and just knocks you right off the part. All right, now what I'm going to do is take the tape off, clean that up, and see how the doors are going to fit in that slot. Neat little trick that, oops, show you how to knock the camera over. Show you a neat little trick. I always, when you cut a slotted part, you want a slotted part to fit in. One of the best tricks is to cut the slot a little bit shorter than you need to, and then cut back the edges. And what that does, if you make the slot longer than it has to be, look at my finger, what happens, you see the end of the slot. This is an old trick from laying tile. You always cut this edge back, cut the corner off, then this piece at the corner tends to lay on top, and you don't see the slot. And it looks like we've got it because we're lucky today. Today's my lucky day. So I just need to cut that back just a slight bit. That little bit. That'll kind of disguise the end of the joint. Remember tiling the bathroom, learning how to hide grout joints in the corner. You always look, when you look in a room, they hide each other. Yeah. Well, you can use, see, any technology you learn, you can always use it on something else too. Now also what this will do, this will help, we won't have to worry about letting go of the part and it falls into the fuselage. As I say that, it'll probably fall in. Okay, I'm going to mix up some clear epoxy and then set these in. epoxy sets up, I can get right in there and get out the extra. Well, hopefully the extra. Got to kind of babysit this for a while, because I want that seam to be clean as a whistle if possible. And if I get a black line there, which it doesn't look like I'm going to have, one of the things I'll be able to do is simply just get a brush with about 3 hairs and run a bead of red down there. Don't think I'll have to do that though. This worked out to be such a nice tight fit. I got a last step here, and nothing sophisticated about this. I want to paint in there black. Just get the old spray gun out, put a coat of black in there, and let this dry overnight. And we're coming up on looks like some flying weather. Now once that dries up, I guess we'll closing in on this. The last couple of steps here. But what we really need is some weather. I'm all waiting for that paint to dry. It's some beautiful. Look at the size of these pictures. They're like 8.5 by 11s or something. Cleon Lingwood from California. He did a job of converting over one of his ships with the gold anodized gear that we're making right now. George Venturini's making them, and we're selling them. And by the way, they are selling very well. Now I asked him to let me know how they work out, so if we needed it, since he's one of the first customers that's actually put one on a plane and taken a picture, we can get to see how it looks. Other than, of course, George's ship. These look beautiful. Now he sent me this nice set of pictures, and obviously we'll send these on to Stunt News and pick the best 2 or 3. This looks like it shows up real well. And the nice thing here is these really are solid. Some of the wire setups, these are rock solid. I'm looking at, he's got the little thing like the Cardinal has, the little fillet in here. That's good. I hope he's using Aero Epoxy Light. Let me take the little captions off. Cool, and this guy is some good photographer. Cleon, you got to come out east here and take some pictures of Miss Ashley for me. The quality of these pictures. I'm used to getting these pictures that look like I took them in the mail. Okay, so this is one that he's got. Let's see. New nose required after Fox 35 broke crankshaft. We know what that's like. Now, what would have been a good idea, just thinking of something here, if you wanted to, is put plywood pieces on top of this joint. Put the gear right on top of there with 1 bolt on each side. That would have been okay. That would have been fine as a way of repairing things. But that is the longest nose I've ever seen. It's longer than my nose. Anyway, I guess he needed it. It's kind of a cool look with the long nose. But look at the flying field these guys have. Well, California, what do you expect? Everything's nicer and easier and more pleasant. Right now, come on, Cleon, come on over. I need some help getting up and down a roof. After a day of roofing, my hands are hurting. Carrying those shingles. Mike's a hard guy to work for. Nice looking plane. Real nice ship. RC Jet Runway. Oh, this is their flying site. Oh, there's like a jet right there. Anyway, Cleon, I'm going to send these on to Tom Morris. I'm sure he'll use some of them. And I'm glad the landing gear worked out well for you. A nice set of photos. Appreciate it a whole lot. We're waiting out the time that we're going to take to actually do a final trim on this. What I did is I set up my little bench here to do some calculations and realized this plane is relatively nose heavy, which I guess is the best of all worlds. And I wanted to see how much solder it was going to take. Now obviously to get it at 15%, and I don't want to fly it if it's more than 15% nose heavy. So what I did, I have that figured out, and that was the first step. Now the other thing I wanted to do is I have a lighter spinner. These are the Russian ones that they don't make anymore. Some of the hardware I've been fitting up here. I fit the other engine in to make sure everything, see, because there's two different needle valve holes and things like that. The headers may be a little bit different every once in a while. I made up a spare pipe, and that the outlet on this looks real cool. I don't know if we're going to keep this as a spare or use it as the primary pipe, but it exits right out over the back. You can see what that'll look like when the bottom is on. Also, in the course of fooling around with this and waxing it, and I realized a couple of little things that I really want to upgrade before we actually go out to the flying field. Now, if I had not checked and seen how nose heavy this was, it'd be a very disappointing first day. You get down to Middlesex, everybody's down there or whatever, and what happens is you lose a day. And flying days are so few and far between that I don't want to lose. Actually, I don't want to lose any of them. But at least the best of all worlds is if you don't need any weight. It looks like we're going to have a little bit of a nose heavy condition. Now the choices are I can try to make up an even lighter spinner than this. This is considerably lighter than an aero spinner. Again, they don't make them anymore, as is always the case. And what I plan to do, I'm going to pick up some fresh clay. Well, my clay looks like it's 1,000 years old. And when we actually do get to fly the plane, I know I need this much solder to get it balanced. But I can take when I'm done or fine-tuning it, or if I want it to corner harder or whatever, I can adjust the solder. When I have it exactly the way I want it, then the choices are obvious. I can make well, I don't even have to make one. I have a brass tail wheel. I can also, and then depending on the vertical CG, I can pack the tail cone with clay and just leave it there. I can weigh out this much clay and push it in with a little stick. And what's nice about the clay, if some of it comes loose, it won't clog up the controls. A piece of lead would be a problem. It would clog up the control or possibly be a problem. But anyway, as we go down the final home stretch here, this is really, I gave up already on the tape. It doesn't stick worth even 10 minutes. But again, I just wanted to have it in inventory. I wanted to see possibly if it did work. You never really know. Anyway, knowing that it's real nose heavy is a big relief, because it's a lot easier in my feeling. If it's nose heavy, the things that you have to do are all real positive. Lighten up the spinner, lighten up any other hardware, and I still don't have the tank from Joe Adamusco, the real fuel tank that's going to go in there. Those things seem easy to deal with. When you have a plane that's real tail heavy and you start loading up 2 ounces of weight on a nose or an ounce, its gyroscopic action is always a problem. You always wind up, when it's tail heavy, that the vertical CG is out, the horizontal CG is out. It's a nightmare to trim, where I expect, being a little bit nose heavy and being relatively light, in fact around 55 ounces, maybe 56, maybe 54, depending, I always start out with a whole lot more tip weight than I need, and usually when I'm done, there's at least a third of it or maybe even a half of it comes out, depending on, I'm hoping we're going to get that first flight down to Middlesex and the air will be decent, but again, you never know. Everything is so unpredictable with the weather. Came from Rory Tennyson today. It actually came from Dan Shane, and they sent me a video of their club flying in Montana. Boy, what scenery. You guys really have it made. Anyway, this is, what year is this? I wonder if George would know. 1949. So here's the rules. 1949, you want to fly toy planes? All men had a 8-hour-a-day job and could support their wives. No wives worked. No kids had earrings or tattoos. Let's see what the other rules are. No tune pipes. Oh man, it is really nice. Look at all this stuff. Anyway, Rory, I always appreciate having stuff like this. Thanks a whole lot. We got some nice pictures from Jim Smith. He's a friend of Bill Rich, who is a friend of, well, I guess we're all friends. What am I talking about? Sent some nice pictures of his latest model and said he helped Bill Rich clear the area where he's flying, and he went on and on about what a good guy Bill Rich is. Hey, I know that. Everybody likes Bill Rich. Now, there's a point to all this, you know? And it's good to always remember, unless you're the exception to the rule, nobody is born knowing any of this. They're not born knowing about Brodak dope or propellers or carbon fiber or anything. We all need to learn. And when people help us learn, in my case, I've had so many people help me that the list would go on, we'd run out of video. But one of the people I feel I've been able to help is Bill Rich, who now is in a position to help Jim Smith when they go flying. Bill can pass on some of his good techniques and tips and whatever. And that's the idea. It's like the cycle, the circle of life, the cycle of life, whatever you want to call it. It's when you can pass the information on that you've gotten, then you've completed your link in the chain. And I think that's what makes our hobby special, is almost everybody does. Name me somebody that does. There's probably a few stick in the muds left, but not many. Also got a really nice letter from Ken Clapson, Ken Agroponic Clapson. And this is really funny. He takes a picture of a bear. It looks like a bear or something out here, a walrus or something up in Canada. What's funny, I feel like putting a caption on this and sending it to Stunders. The bear that ate Ken Clapson's tsunami. And there's all the people that have been watching the videos over the last, I guess, year or so, and Ken's been building this copy of Tsunami, this version. This is, he's flown it, and he's in love with it, as is Paul Walker, so I don't know, there's a message there. Send me a pizza or something. Anyway, and I'll tell you, I count myself as one of the people. I have shamed Paul Winter into putting the lettering on his Tsunami. He called today, and he's going to put the lettering on. Paul, and he also was on a cell phone. This was funny. I told him to write it up for Stun. He's on a cell phone. It jumped out of his hand and went through the wing of Voodoo. Oh, Paul, you're okay. Anyway, this is his wife Evelyn did the artwork and everything. Absolutely beautiful. That's the view we all like. Ken, that is awesome. Now, I got something to really... Even Paul Winter, eat your heart out. Wait till you see this. We know Ken's been building a stuntress, and he's got the Voodoo type. I wouldn't say Voodoo perfect, but this is a very close rendition of Voodoo's paint job here. Anyway, he says he loves the purple, loves the Brodak dope. I don't know. This looks pretty good. I'm going to by the way, rather than send these to Stunt News, I'm going to pass these on to Joe Adamusco when we go down to Middlesex next week. In fact, you know what you do, Ken? I'll send these down to Stunt News because we're almost on deadline. But do me a favor, you send some down to, get a couple of nice ones down to Joe Adamusco. He'll love this. And Ken says no matter what, he's not going to talk on a cell phone when he's within 20 feet of his paint job. I believe Paul Winter. Says a Jet 50, hey. Ken, I don't know what to say. I'm speechless. It looks like a pretty good paint job to me. Anyway, we're going to get back to the shop. We got a couple little projects that we just can't wait to get this thing in the air. Getting itchy. Another thing we're going to find out, I'm doing this as a test, I'm putting a stinger on with JB Weld. This is a 450 OD, similar to an arrow shaft. It's all pre-made, made from high temperature resin, but I'm not sure. Well, I can use my plane as a guinea pig to see if the JB Weld is going to hold up. In fact, we won't use this pipe when we run it the first time. We'll use this for a test on a test bench for a couple of runs. See if that JB Weld is going to hold up. I put this tip on a video previously, but these sanding sponges that we got, Sandman abrasives, one of the things these are real nice for. Whenever I have the engine out of the plane, and in this case what I'm doing is taking all my motors, since we have a rainy day, what I'm trying to do is clean off all the oil residue from a season of flying, and these will be the backup motors for the new plane, and try to get all my backup hardware. See, whenever I get a rainy day like this, I try to use it, well, spare parts, backup parts, whatever you want to call them. But these work real good. It's always a job getting this stuff off the header. Now, the other thing, the smoother, hang Let's see if we got some. Yeah, we got some here. The smoother of these sanding sponges, put a nice polish once you get the stuff, the goop off. And it would be a good idea anytime you have it out of the plane to do it. But again, these parts have a season of flying on them, a half a season. You can see how nice that cleans and polishes it right up. Just one more little maintenance thing that'll help keep everything nice and clean and neat, and we'll have all our backup parts ready, well, by the end of today, I hope. The thing I've learned works kind of well. Aluminum RTV silicone gasket. Now, we got these gaskets from George, and what I wanted to do on the test bench and whatever, I wanted to see how they held up. Well, they held up real well. Normally, when a gasket is leaking, you can see a little stripe of material across there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give this a try, and this will be another one of our little experiments, and when I get time, if it ever stops raining, get a day of running this on the test bench and see. Now, the copper gaskets alone work well. This may seal it up even better. I'm not sure. But this will be one of the things we want to try for the near future. Now, usually you let this sit about 5. This is made that if you don't have any gasket at all. Now, I don't want to. I've tried that already, and I've not had good luck. What I want to try is putting this on both sides, and again, we'll find out. Doesn't work, we'll just clean it off the next time we have this motor apart. Again, the only objective here is to seal this joint as neatly as possible. And I want to do the same thing. I want to put it on both sides of the little copper gasket. Now, these are really made for the side exhaust engine, but I've just re-drilled them for the rear exhaust. The opening is exactly the same. I've learned, and this is just common automotive aircraft practice, is always torque the bolts, especially the header bolts. These are just really delicate in a lot of ways. And you don't want to take, what you don't want to do is tighten one bolt all the way and squeeze it and then go to get the other one. It's like a head. You want to torque it equal. And whatever oozes out. That's, just can clean it up with a Q-tip. Now, just preliminary. Get the Q-tip out of here. Get this goop off of here. Because I want to see if I have a good seal. When I'm running this on a bench, I can see if I get little beads, little dots coming out or whatever. And then once I have the preliminary, then I can torque one side and the other side. Little copper gaskets are available from George. Now, if you're already one of the people that's bought one of my tune pipes, you'll know I do a very vigorous testing program. And what I want to do is share with you the information that I've learned over the years, going back to, we started making pipes in the late 80s with the help of Dave Midgley, who did a lot of the molding parts of it. At that time, he had an oven and I didn't. What I've learned since then, of course, there's a lot of things that have improved and gotten better, and I'd like to go through this real quickly, just so you have a little understanding of where our pipe program is going. Years, Dave Midgley and I experimented. The first pipes we made, and this is going back to the late 80s, they had perfectly flat baffles, usually sheet metal. And what we found, and I guess other people have found out, it's common two-stroke technology that's available in print, and much of it is out on the internet. But we found that in the world of model airplanes, and our requirements are unique, that by putting a 20-degree cone, a 20-degree angle in the cone of the baffle, and Dave made up a Teflon mold that we use, in fact we still use it, that has a 20-degree angle in it, that what we were able to get is peak power that was very, very steep. We were able to get something like this. We were able to get a much wider, friendlier needle range. Now, of course, a speed pipe or a no-baffle pipe, these are the three major ways they make pipe. A speed pipe would have a power peak like this. So one of the things we've done over the years, and we've tried different angles and different things, is we've kind of settled in on the fact that we like a cone baffle pipe for the way we like to run motors. Now please don't confuse this with like a put down of somebody else's system. A lot of people have been very successful with flat baffle pipes, and this is just same way some people like Foxes and some people like OS Maxes. It's just a different way to run it. Now I like to run my motors with the cone baffle because I seem to get a much more defined motor brake. So I've kind of developed this over the years with several of the molds and the Teflon molds I have into a system that I want to use in Miss Ashley. This is my system that I've evolved over about a 15-year period, which seems to work well for me. There's obviously a lot of other systems. One of the systems is you can buy a motor and a pipe, basically a $500 or $600 investment, put it in a plane and go fly. I have a much different system. What I like to do when I get a motor, and I've gotten excellent results with George's GMA Jet 60, obviously the PAs, the double stars, all the modern motors are good quality motors. It's not a comparison of motors, because you basically set up a motor the way you put a shoe on, how you like it. Some people like tremendous peak power, some people like a nice fat range, same as props. Some people want real low pitch props where they run the motor hard. Some people like 4 or 5 pitch where the motor runs a little softer and quieter. But if you follow this, I think this will help out. One of the things when I start making up, and I'm going to start a production run of pipes in the next couple of days. Of that production run, I want to make, at the same time I'm making them, I want to make a couple of spare pipes for Miss Ashley so I can test them. And I'll show you what the little thing that I want to try. I'm going to start by assuming all of the pipes are going to have cone baffles. One is I'm going to put the motor and the header, and basically we'll have no exhaust system on the bench, and I'm just going to make a number up, and I'm going to use the prop that I want to use in the plane. In this case it's George's 3-blade as a square one. So I have the prop will stay constant for the whole test, and so will the fuel. Prop and fuel have to stay the same if you want to have a relatively valid test. So the first thing is I'm going to record a reading to maximum RPM, and this is a very crude way to do it, but it works every time. Let's say that the crude reading here is I'm going to get 10,500 RPM, which is probably typical with a 3-blade carbon prop. Now the next step is I'm going to bolt on the exhaust system, and this part of it up here will be variable. I can insert little pieces in, and I will start by running the pipe at 17 inches, 17 and a half, 18. These are just the typical numbers, 18 and a half, and 19. For what I've found and the RPM I'm comfortable running, these 5 settings will give me a little power curve. And somewhere in here there'll be a spike. Typically, let's say that right here you're going to get 10. I'm just going to make numbers up. Here you're going to get 10.6. Here you're going to get 10.7, 10.6, and 10.5. Just to make a little analogy up, what you have is right here is the power spike. Right here is where maximum power is. So what I want to do now, knowing that, then I want to zero in on, and remember we're measuring the mean average point of the cone. In other words, the cone baffle, you measure the mean average point. You don't measure all the way to the point. Typically with the pipes that I've made for other people and for myself, 18 inches is a good starting point. A little shorter will give you more power. A little longer, if you can keep it running on the pipe, it'll run friendlier and friendlier and get more and more what we consider a typical 2/4 stroke run. Up here it's going to start getting more and more like a speed ship. But this is a good way that I've found to do it, to establish this right on the bench, not even have the motor in the plane. The last part of this, before we're actually done and ready to go, is I'll take old Strago off the wall, put in the pipe that's already set where I think the power spike is. And remember what happens on hotter days, the pipe tends to get longer. On cooler days it tends to get shorter. Sound wave in a high density volume, the cooler the air is, the shorter the pipe is. The warmer the air is, the longer the pipe is. So if you're in Canada, obviously Ken Clapson's going to be running some short pipes. Guys in Brazil are going to be running long pipes. We wind up somewhere in the middle of that. But now you see what's happened is I've spent probably an hour, hour and a half, a gallon of fuel. I don't even have the motor in the plane yet. Now it's going to go in a test plane. In this case, it's Strega. That's our old test bed plane. And what happens here is I want to see if I'm real close. So on the first flight, when I put a motor in for testing or a new pipe, what I'll do is I'll start at 18, move it out to 18 and a half, move it down to 17 and a half, because I know that's about where I'm going to be in the maximum power. The power range that I've found usable is about an inch. You get much longer than that power spike of an inch, and power really kind of drops off. Or on the other end, you've just turned your motor into a speed motor where it's only going to get on the pipe at 12,000 RPM or something crazy like that. So by doing this, now notice, the thing that's significant here is we haven't even got the motor into a plane yet that we're going to be flying competition with. And in this case, when we're real happy with everything that's going to happen in Strega, and we're going to try to get out this weekend with Strega and do motor testing, even in this rainy, crappy weather we've been having. The idea being when we take this, and this is step 4, and this is my plan. This works very well for me. Take that motor with the header all attached, the rubber coupler, the pipe set where I think it should be to whatever stinger set situation is, and the prop. That whole thing can just get bolted into the plane as one unit. And what I hope to do is eventually have not only a pre-tested motor pipe where all the dirty work is done in a test plane, that I can bolt this whole assembly into Miss Ashley and be relatively close, so on that very critical first flight I don't wind up with crazy things, that couplers being looser or whatever. I just really feel this 4-step program, it's worked very reliably for me, and you can use this to your advantage. There's nothing here that you need to be a rocket scientist to do. And if you're just starting out with pipes, like I know many people are, this information I think will serve you well. One of the other things I wanted to do, over the years when I've tested pipes, I've wound up cutting them shorter than they have to be, and what you need then, of course, is 2 rubber couplers. The couplers weigh a lot. They add an element of uncertainty in the fact that you need more zip ties and there's significantly more vibration. So what I've tried to do now is I've tried to come up with numbers, because I've done this so many times. I've come up with numbers that on the pipes that I make from the mandrels that I use, I have a real good idea. I can use a cone baffle in the back, point the stinger up, and I'm going to go over this in a second to lay some information that I've learned on you. But what I do is I make up one pipe where the baffle will be relatively at, let's just make a number up, at 18. Then I'll make another pipe up where the baffle is a little bit closer in, maybe a half inch, and another pipe where it's out here. So one will be 18 and a half, let's say, one will be 17 and a half. Now, what happens here is I don't need this. I can change the pipe itself as long as everything else is constant, and these are made from molds so that the pipes are not that much different. What happens is when I want to change the pipe length, I just change the whole pipe to a shorter pipe, a longer pipe, and I can make the pipe 2 different ways. You can put the baffle, because this is a constant belly section for quite a while, I can move the baffle inside the pipe, and that keeps the stinger in the same spot. Or I can just shorten this piece, and remember, I would never get it shorter than where that aluminum tube is. That aluminum tube, in other words, the 2 situations are some of the pipes that we've made that slide over the header like a trombone. What you have to be real careful of is that when you put the clamp on, the clamp is not here. The clamp is over aluminum at all times. Or that the little piece of aluminum stays in the pipe to keep the zip tie from compressing, because when the resin gets hot, and this is the hottest part of the pipe, you don't squeeze the pipe. On a tune pipe, there's 2 distinct things happening. There's a part of the pipe that sonically is going to reflect a wave, and it's this part of the pipe right up to the mean average point of the baffle. Or in the case of a flat baffle, it would be at the face of the baffle. This is the part of the pipe that works, and everything that happens in here is doing something significant that you want to take advantage of, the pluses and minuses of having this tuning ability. Everything that happens back here, the muffling part of the pipe, is relative to the front part is insignificant. And back here, if you were to locate the stinger in the center, like a Bryan ether pipe is, which works fine, the thing I don't like about that is you wind up with this rubber, which to me, anytime I've tested them, seems to add an element of restriction and unnecessary. It does quiet it down and it does keep oil off the plane, but I've found a better way for me is, and I believe Billy Werwich's pipes now come this way, that the stinger is made out of carbon and it's built right into the pipe. Now, when it's put on a relatively flat angle like this, what I found is the smoke trail starts to look like a steam engine, and I don't like that look. So what I've done is the latest couple of pipes that I've made, I've put this on a very shallow angle, maybe a 5-degree angle, out the back, out the top, so that this is not acting like a rooster. Imagine a rooster tail. And this is a significant negative thing. When you're flying the plane and that oil stream is coming out especially on inside squares, it always looks like the plane is putting a little wiggle in there. By having the stinger angle back, and remember, it's very easy to make these changes before you run a pipe and it's not oil soaked. It's not impossible after, but it's a lot better to decide where you want, if you're going to order a custom pipe like the helicopter guys do, and they want that in a certain spot. Before you run the pipe, you want to put that exactly where you want it. And that's one of the things I'm going to be doing, is I'm going to be making, in the next couple of days, some spare pipes. Another part of pipe technology, one pipe is useless. One pipe, I don't know. If it seems like any of these pipe-related things, when you only have one, you're on a hair trigger. I've seen pipes that have developed leaks, pinholes, cracks, physically broken. Up here they melt from lean runs typically. Hose clamps that distort the whole thing because they're put on incorrectly. A tune pipe is something like a tire on a car. You really should have at least one spare, and I'd be comfortable if I had a lot more than one spare in the case of Miss Ashley. Not everybody wants to make their own tune pipes, and I just thought I'd put a minute or two of how we actually go about making them. They're made, this is a solid TFE Teflon mandrel. It has a very slight curve in it so it can go over the curve of the wing. It's solid Teflon, so you need no release agent. Now what happens is, you take a carbon fiber sock, basically coat this with resin. It's high temperature resin, special resin. And this gets laid up, and we create, from this, we create the shell of the tune pipe. That's step one, and that takes one cycle to get the shell. Now once that cures, that gets removed from the mandrel, and you can see we have a very light, extremely light, this is feather light, a shell. But because it's relatively thin and compressed, there's a good chance that somewhere in here there's, in fact, see the little pinholes in there? So this does need another coat of resin. Now the way I make these, I sand this whole thing down with 80 grit. You can't just put resin on top of cured resin. It has to be like this before you put the second coat on. And that you can do in a lathe, or you can just sit and sand it by hand. What I found works real well is to wet sand it. Never dry sand carbon unless you're using a mask. And I understand not everybody is going to want to make their own tune pipes, but once you have a mandrel and the material, you can make, custom sizes. You can put bends in them like you do for the helicopter people. Or in the case of Miss Ashley, you can make one with fancy stingers coming out the side, the bottom, the back. Or you can just send me the drawings and I'll make it. So this is the second step of this. This is one of the shells that has 2 coats of resin. Right now it has no pinholes, but you can see it's got kind of a rough, pebbly surface, which is not unacceptable to some people, but for me, I'd much rather have a smooth surface. Now keep in mind, by making it smooth, you reduce the heat dissipation. A rough surface, just like a sand cast surface, dissipates heat better. But a tune pipe, it doesn't matter if it's hot or if it's cold. What it needs to be is constant. When you change the temperature inside the pipe, you change the length of the pipe. So by leaving it rough or making it smooth, you can accomplish whatever you choose. I can take about 10 grams of weight off by just putting a smooth finish on, and my pipes tend to be relatively light. Now after a third coat of resin, and this is the third coat, each coat is sanded down. You can see just how smooth that's getting, but we're still not finished with it yet. It's a 3-step process. It takes 3 cure cycles to get it the way I like it, or the way I'm comfortable having it. This one is ready for the polishing operation. And here's one with a normal, I call it a normal Stinger back end. The baffle's marked with a heat-proof paint. Pressure fitting can go anywhere that's convenient for the plane. Some people prefer right up here. I think the reason is they like to keep the tubing short. I've tried many times, in fact I've even done it with George Aldrich's pipe, of putting several pressure fittings in and moving it, and I haven't found any significant difference running the fitting in the back, the middle, or the front. At least on the way I'm using the motors, it doesn't seem like a critical thing. The typical mold that we use to make the conical baffles, it's a rubber mold, an RTV mold. It produces a baffle, and then we put the hole, in this case it's a 450 diameter hole, and keeping as much of the baffle at a 20-degree angle as possible. I've also experimented with shallow angle baffles. Again, that you can change the whole characteristic of a pipe by making the angle different. And this is what they look like when they actually come out of the mold. They need to be trimmed, fitted. Now, when these are glued in the pipe, and they get glued in with a very special high temperature resin glue that needs to be post-cured just like the pipe. This can be put any number of sections in the constant belly section. We have a variation of about 3 inches that we can put this in. Again, by having a lot of choices, it allows me to make custom pipes that when you're just making from one set of mandrels or one set of molds would be very inconvenient at best. What I try to do is wait till I get orders for 4 or 5 or 6 pipes and then run them all in one cycle. This way I only have to run the oven once, and it keeps the production time to make pipes. Now I'm going to make a run of 4 or 5 or 6 pipes here depending, and I'm going to, at the same time I'm doing it, make a couple of spare pipes. Now that we have one pipe that fits in Miss Ashley and we're real happy with it, we want to make a relatively similar replication of it for our testing purposes, so we can change the pipe and not have to have that extra little coupler up in the front. Now just one little thing as we do go through the steps, painting the resin on. Again, you have to use high temperature resin. You can get this from George Spar. It's not hard to buy. If you make mandrels out of aluminum, what you have to do is use a parting agent. PVA seems to work. Trouble with aluminum is after you keep beating the pipes off, it's hard to get them off because there's very, very shallow draft angles. Midgley came up with this idea of making them out of solid Teflon, and it's worked extremely well. And anybody would like one of these mandrels, I mean, we've offered these to anybody making pipes basically for free. Contact Dave Midgley and work it out with him. He's the one that procures the material and does the machining. This machining is relatively difficult to do, even by somebody who does normal machine shop work. And because this is a multi-step process, I don't try to make them too fancy right in the very beginning. I don't give that a lot of concern. I only want those last couple of coats. You can see the resin starting to bleed through. And then we'll fire up the oven, get the oven cooking out there. This is one of the last parts, actually this is the last part, hopefully, for the Miss Ashley project, and we will be. Well, we could always use an old pipe. We have plenty of old pipes, but I'd like to have everything just the way it's going to be on a final model. I don't know, there's just something like a new car. You don't want to put the old mats in a new car. Favorite parts of running a run of production pipes. I always sand them wet, And always start with 80 grit. In the same way when we polish a spinner, work your way down in grits, down to 220, 320, 600, 1200. And guess what? You always wind up. When you're all done, gorums. Anyway, I found that by doing it this way, it's a lot of extra work as opposed to a lot of people that make pipes prefer to just put the resin on all at once and just let it look like an alligator's rear end. Well, I like, part of the thing I like about these is everybody that seems to look at them, first off, they notice that they're lighter. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out all those pebbles are just adding weight. This is time consuming. It's a little tough on your hands, a little tough on the wall. At the end of the day, I have to, at the end of polishing a bunch of these up, I have about a 20-minute cleanup operation. Now what I do, as soon as I'm done with that step, I go down to, I have the sanding sponge, that's the next softer grit. And this starts to really cook it. You can actually smell it burning in. And again, if you don't, between coats, if you don't roughen it up, and what happens at this stage, chunks of it start chunking out. There we go, now we're starting to burn it in. But anyway, at least by seeing this, you have some appreciation of what goes into a tune pipe. And no matter who makes it, there's always it's a high labor item. It's not the kind of thing that's just extremely easy to make. Like a motor, there's a lot of hand labor involved. There comes the polish now. You can see the smoke. Now, these pipes get so hot that when you're doing this operation, that they actually, my hand is starting, look at it, you can see this starting to smoke too. And the last thing is, of course, the gorums, and you can see how quickly the gorums brings it up. Now, I went and bought, like a fool, I went and bought this $30, I don't know, a tub called fiberglass polish. You know what? It doesn't work as good as gorums. Nothing works as good as gorums. And when a customer gets a pipe, or if we use, it doesn't matter. I just like it to look like it's a part of the B-2 bomber, or a part of Tsunami or something. You can see how that polish. Now you see this doesn't ride in the chuck because this pipe purposely has a little bend here so it can go around the wing. If you use an aluminum mandrel, that's almost impossible to duplicate. But so far we've had real good luck with these. I haven't had any of them come back. On today's mail, and we've got some nice stuff here. This came from Joe Adamusco, and you can see he made it to the specs that I sent him because I want to have that tank angled in the plane. That was one of my motives. Make sure that it's, and this is just a little bit different. It's like a nobler tank. And I know George had good luck with these tanks with Fox 35s. Well, I haven't had one in a long time, but Joe makes them this way all the time. This has a baffle in it with 8 3/32 8 1/8 inch holes. He's got the vents in a little bit different position. Now what I want to do is, because I have the plane all apart in pieces, I want to check that this is going to be, reasonable to change at the field. Because what I want to have, obviously, I want to have choices. I want to get Wayne to make me up, if possible, a carbon fiber tank. But in the meantime, I want to have a normal replacement, ordinary 1-inch tank. This kind of a special tank, and this is 6.5 ounces. In case I want to test higher nitro contents or more compression. And needless to say, I want to have choices. The whole thing here is to have choices. That's a real work of art, by the way. Just look at some of the workmanship on this, and this is Joe Adamusco's handwork, the seaming. Absolutely beautiful. Joe, I thank you very much. Now what I'm doing for Joe is, and in that last production run that we were making a patch the other day, I made him up a custom pipe for his stuntress. I need to make one for Ken Clapson also. They're both, hopefully within the next batch, I'll be able to get both of them done. Talk about a perfect fit. Holy mackerel. Joe, awesome. Absolutely awesome. Joe was my my wingman for so long here. I'm getting spoiled. That is a beautiful fit. Look at the fit. What a nice tank. So now I have a 5.5, a 6, and a 6.5, and hopefully, Wayne, waiting for that carbon tank. I love you if you make it. If you don't make it, I still love you. It's okay, and we'll see you at Brodax. And this you could do on any plane. I made my tank shims out of carbon fiber laminated balsa. This way, when you go to get them out, of course, you have something to grab with the pliers. And definitely lighter than plywood, and I think it's a little easier on the tank. Some of the material we made in the development of Miss Ashley making it. Now, I feel terrible. I went to put the engine in the plane, and see, this is why you always do it ahead of time. And I realized with the header in the plane, and before when I had checked it, I didn't take into account where the header was going to wind up. By the way, these little scissors, these are the ones that Larry Cunningham sent. These are extremely good for making little tank modifications. Now, if I had time, I would ship the tank back to Joe so he could do it, but we really want to get this thing in the air soon. One thing with a tuned pipe plane, that you need the bigger tank, and I want to make this little patch here. And believe me, I hold a record as the world's worst solderer. I'll make sure I have enough of a lip on all sides. And this can be real tricky. I remember the first Nobler I ever made. I made the gas tank like the George Aldrich plans. The thing weighed about 4 pounds. Anyway, now what I need to do is get this back in place, and one by one bend these little tangs into position. The only really realistic way I know of to do this is to bend all the tabs down and solder one side first. I don't know whether this is going to be good information. You really never get all of the tabs down in the same, at least I don't. I'll solder this first side first. Even just tack it, because once this is in place, then I can come back and do the other side. A lot of times with a tuned pipe plane, you want to wind up with a bigger tank, and that header always seems to be in the way. First piece just tacked in. Now I can get these corners relatively nice. And then most of all, I'll go check it in the plane. I've done this before where I forgot to take into account the header size. Really isn't good for your ego. Now if that fits the way I want it to, then I can run the seam. Even that's a little too close for comfort because this is real hot, so I'm going to take that out, make another piece, open this up just a little bit more. This is why I have to, and of course it doesn't take into account when you shim the tank up, it runs into the header even more. So good thing I got this done before we get to the field and this header melts the gas tank. Beautiful soldering job, and I mean, I think Warren Walker would even be impressed with that. Believe me, that's not as easy to do as... Why am I saying that? Anyway, what I want to do is check for any air bubbles. And a lot of times when you touch a soldering iron to the tank, it'll leak someplace else. That looks good. Probably for the first time in my life, it isn't leaking so bad. Anyway, I will clean this up. Now the next step is I have to go get a gallon of alcohol, and I'll run a gallon of alcohol through this. The alcohol hopefully will get some of the stuff cleaned out. I have ordinary alcohol. And then I'll run some fuel through it and just watch the fuel coming out in a piece of clean paper to see if we've got it all clean. Because boy, I do not want to have a first flight lean run off the end of the planet. Boy, if there's one thing I really absolutely makes me crazy is when you have a, and I know it happens to everybody, you have a plane, you wait for that first beautiful day of the year. And what I want to do is, before I go any further, this is my little technique. It usually works pretty well, but certainly for the first 100 flights we'll have a filter. Then after 100 flights I like to bypass the filter But by then, you hope by then, if there's still stuff in the tank, you're dead. Anyway, a lot of times I used to have an ultrasonic cleaner at the other shop. I don't have it anymore. That was always helpful. A little baking soda and water could be a good idea. Paint thinner, I've heard of people running acetone through here, but this seems to be one of the ways that's pretty reasonable. Now, once that should, in essence, loosen everything up. Famous last words. Whenever you're dealing with fuel tanks, boy, oh boy. And now I want to watch. Plug this up. What I want to do is, let me see if we got a rag here. We don't even have a good rag. Let's use this. I just want to look at the corner because I want to see if little things are oh, there they are. Yeah. Boy, that's amazing. It came out right away because don't forget I ground on this. I rinsed that out off camera, of course. And because this tank has a baffle, a lot of times some of that stuff will tend to stay in the back of the tank. Now you could, if you were going to run 8 or 10 tanks of fuel through here, you could recover this fuel. It's brand new fuel, but this is last year's fuel. I'm not real worried about it. Okay, that's the only thing that looks like it's on the way out. But again, I'll repeat this a few times until I'm satisfied that we've gotten all the, just for reference, this is what came out of it. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. You can see the little specks that come out of that. At last. Okay, now the clearance is fine and we are able to shim the tank. Whew. Boy, I'll tell you, details, details, details. Fortunately, in the setting up of this plane, and it's getting frustrating, we really have not lucked out with the weather. And the weather report for this weekend is absolutely beautiful. In the 80s, guess what? The club's having their scale contest. Oh, so just was on the phone with Peabody and I realized we're not going to be able to use the field for flying, and Middlesex is having a bike-a-thon. Oh, anyway. What I did here, and it's significant because it's one of the few details left to do on this plane, I've been balancing it with solder on a tail wheel and going back and forth trying to establish where I want it to balance, but there's really nothing better than a first flight. I'm going to take all the light hardware, which will probably lighten the plane down to about 54 ounces when I'm all done, because I had the heavier spinner, and I'm even going to get a lighter pipe eventually out of that batch that we made. But we're closing in on it. And what I was excited about was the first time I weighed it and it was 55 ounces, I was really happy. Now with all the lightweight hardware, it's under 54. Maybe too light. But I want to get some flights on Strega. We will go up to the scale contest, but again, you can't use the field when I have it dedicated for a scale meet. I want to get some time on a new motor I got from George. It's just 100 little details, and at this point in time, the weather's not cooperating, the club is not cooperating, the roof is not cooperating, but the plane is basically, I bet we could fly it tonight. We could fly it tomorrow. We're closing in on it anyway. There's very few little details. We have a spare pipe, we have a spare tank, 3 spare motors. We're getting some more Brian Ether props. They're not here yet, but we have enough to fly the plane. I just get to the point, after so many 100 hours, you just wish it was, you open the door and it's sunny, and you could go flying, and the field would be all mowed and clean there. Well, the field's in decent shape. Most of the time, this time of year, our field is underwater for about a month. We don't have to deal with that this year anyway. Anyway, what I'm going to do, and now this paint is about a month, maybe more than a month old. I have to really look, but it's old enough. I'm going to wax it. This is the first time it's really getting waxed with real carnauba wax. before I go and get fuel spills on it, and then, you know, the people are going to be grabbing it and touching it and everything, who knows what else. The best luck that I've had is waiting, you know, 6 weeks, 4, 5, 6 weeks before you put carnauba wax. If you don't know which brand to buy, a real good idea is buy pure carnauba, Simon Eis's pure carnauba. Look at the ingredients, and the only thing you want to see is carnauba. Another thing is pardol. That ordinary pardol wax is good. Now, I want to really be meticulous. Obviously, I'm not going to wax the plane on camera, but the wax works well on everything. It works well on carbon fiber parts. It works good on paint, Brodak, dope, any kind of finish. Another thing too is we're expecting this week to have an Elliot. And Elliot has a digital camera, so we're going to try to take a nice photo shoot before this puppy goes in the air, just in case. You know the old feeling. You never know what kind of demons can be lurking inside a plane, but anyway, that's the world of model planes. Now, in today's mail, this is from John Grigsby. He responding to the thought that I had about using 3 push rods, and you can see his diagram here. He had a great idea for a little clevis arm with a ball link on each end and a clevis in the middle. He made up the specifications for it. And this is one of the things Gerald Champ was real concerned with when he was getting to the point in the Mustang, in his Mustang, that he had to come up with a solution for this problem. And I'm not satisfied that I even have a solution. My idea was to use 3 bell cranks, but this certainly looks like it would be a doable solution too. John sent these pictures of Jake Moon, and the caption he wrote for the photo is, "Windy, watch out, you're in big trouble. I have nicer knees than you." And his caption on this one is, "Windy, are you sure you have a tune pipe that'll fit this plane?" What the heck. Oh, I don't know. The caption on this plane is it's too big for him to fly by himself. I don't know. He's going to get bigger. The plane won't get bigger, but he will. Yeah, listen, dummy. You want to figure out how to have dihedral in your wing? Don't worry, Windy. We'll figure it out for you. And the caption on this one is, "This is Steve Moon's B-25. This is his first one." Now imagine, he's built another one. Anyway, hey, one of the things I always liked the idea maybe you could make a full-size Mitchell Stunner look like the ballerina in flight. Steve Moon's X-35 at VSC. John, and by the way, John is successfully making those great carbon fiber wheel pants. Anybody wants a set of carbon fiber, now they're not fiberglass, wheel pants, contact John. He's in Texas. Just mention that you saw it on a Windy video and you get a free set of carbon wheel pants. Absolutely free. You don't even have to pay for them. Unless your name isn't Windy. I don't even have a pair of them. Now this is some pictures of Paul Winter's Voodoo under construction. I see he's invented some things along the way here. And we're always in trouble when Paul invents things. Anyway, he's going to definitely bring this. Now I'm going to read right off his letter. He's definitely bringing this to Brodax. This is more construction photos. Definitely going to bring this to Brodax. And he's going to have Windy fly it. And Kent Tyser fly it. And Midgley fly it. Anyway, this does have a nice look. He's got the carbon fiber canopy on it. I made him that carbon fiber canopy. Flat tail. I like this rudder shape a lot better than the last one. Anyway, this is an idea, and you can see from this picture, it's an idea I've had for, especially if you're making a wood fuselage, to keep everything in alignment while you're sanding it and working on it. See how he has 2 beams, like, held in position there? That's a good idea. And he's got the wing up in silver already, and he said this is coming out super, super light. Which probably means it's about 10 ounces too heavy. Paul, we're really ribbing you, but we love you, kid. Here it is in silver. Look at this. You got a 4-bladed prop. He's got the manifolds, the carbon fiber cockpit. Here he goes into the paint job. Look how he marked black, white, black, white. Come on, Paul, just do it. No, I can't tell by the pictures. Well, he's determined to make a voodoo paint job and using Brodak purple. Oh, this looks cool as heck. Anyway, this definitely will definitely looking like voodoo here. Now combine this with Ken Clapson's latest effort. That's stuntress with the voodoo paint job. There's going to be more voodoos than voodoos. Anyway, thanks a lot, Paul. We'll send them on to Stunt News. Now in today's mail, boy, this has got me really excited. I thought it was a milkshake, a chocolate milkshake. Now, what it is, it's some expanding foam from Ed Gallagher. And I thought, well, what the hell am I going to use this for? Well, I read his letter, of course, and he's got the whole deal on how to use it. Of course, he sends me samples. Good man. And I look at this and I'm saying, well, what the hell is he making a mold of here? A snow shovel or something? Or a, you know, what it is, of course, Ed is into giant RC scale. It's a mold of a half a wheel pan. I don't know what plane this is, but what he did is, and this was just a test mold, he laid this up with polyester resin and his print through and a flat spot on it and everything. So obviously it's a throwaway disposable part right now, but what it is, when we're making our mold for the wing, it's going to be a very large mold. He sent me about 20 little tips here, what to do and what not to do, on a mold this large. Now what they do is they lay this up with fiberglass, and then this expanding foam in the middle of it, and then another layer of fiberglass on the outside, and you can see, I mean, that is, and light, there's nothing to this. So it's a way we'll probably be able to make a mold very realistically for the wing. Of course, with gel coat, we're still waiting for Midgley to finish the plug, but if you get some idea, this is what we want to do in terms of the wing, is have two pieces, and when we put the bell crank in, join the two pieces. Anyway, there's more on that coming, but this is one material we're going to look at using in the future. And I'll tell you, this is, he even sent some dye here. Good man, I'll tell you, he's a good man. I don't care what Midgley says about him. Anyway, this is pretty exciting because the problem with making a wing mold, if we wanted to make one for a Cardinal, one for a Strega, one for a Frank McMillan plane, one for something else, every time you make that mold, you're talking about a lot of money for material. If you can do the expanded foam method, you're talking about dramatically cutting back the amount of material, and it makes practical making very big, elaborate molds at a very low price. I know Larry Cunningham. Larry, this is what you're going to have to look at. When you want to make a mold and not spend a lot of money, that's one way of doing it. Now, Dennis made these up a while back. We just haven't had a chance to hand finish them. These are a replica of the prop that I used on a Spitfire. Now, one of the things, because Miss Ashley has turned out to be relatively nose heavy, we're trying to pull all the weight we can out of the nose and or add some solder to the tail wheel or some clay or whatever to get that balance point back where we want it, back around 15 to 20%. One of the things that I'm going to have to consider, and I've had such good luck with Dennis's props in the past, is possibly using a two-blade prop. Now this prop obviously is half an ounce, maybe even a little more. It's got a very narrow hub. You can see how narrow the hub is. And these seem to be married up to the jet in terms of prop load and whatnot. Now these are 3 that he made up for me. Of course, they've got the patch on them. I'm going to have to hand finish them, but relative to, you know, you don't really need to have a pretty prop at this point in time. I can put a hand finish on, and if I want to make one for appearance judging, I can make one. But he did a real nice job. He's doing, the method that he's using is called paper dolls, where they cut the carbon in strips to fit the mold. You can see how it laid out. And needless to say, all the carbon is from tip to tip. There's none going in the opposite direction, unlike some props. Step 1, of course, is to go over to the saw and cut off all the extra, all the overage. The first step on any of the props that you get from Dennis that always leaves the flashing on. When you're purchasing a prop, you're paying a good part of the cost of the prop for the hand finishing, and I prefer to do it myself. Now, needless to say, anytime you're cutting carbon, you want to wear a mask unless you're shooting video. Cut it nice and slow. Use a new blade, fine-tooth blade. And that roughly gets the prop into its outline shape. Now from this point on, and believe me, don't ever take sandpaper in your bare hand, you'll get a splinter. A real handy tool is the Bud McKnight sanding stick nail file. The first thing I want to do is radius the edges just a bit. Now see, here's where I missed with the saw. I can make that correction. And what you can do is make yourself a little paper template of the blade shape, so you can verify that you're getting both of them exactly the same if the mold is worn like this is. Now what I want to do, I want to dress off, and Dennis has already fixed any little imperfections that are in here. I want to get the whole prop dull. You can see how quick that comes out. Now even though we'll start flying this plane with a 3-blade, we want to have the 2 blades ready in case it's so nose heavy that we need to get that extra 1/2 or 3/4 of an ounce off. Now there's some little spots that have been repaired, but they'll come right out. This has a reflex airfoil in here, so I'm being real careful not to change that. And these were the best props I could find for the Spitfire, especially flying at the circle burner field, so I know they have a good amount of drive. See that little reflex? It's where it dips back. It goes the full length of the prop. That's one of the secrets to this prop that Dennis has already gotten into the mold. The blades are roughed out, and this is just a rough finish. The only spot I don't have is the valley of the reflex. I want to check that the diameters are exactly the same and that they're at 90 degrees. In this case, they're not. And no matter what prop you do, and you want to do your own hand finishing, at least I do. Now I want to get a rough balance before I put any more oh, I didn't do one side here. So you can tell it's brain frying time. Now since we have 3 of these, we can make one a little bit more diameter, one a little bit less. But I would always start the first flights with the biggest one. It's always easier to cut it down than to glue on the tips. Now this one is real close. It's more than 13 inches of diameter, so I know I can't do that. Alright. Dennis, you are okay. I always like to start with whatever pitch the prop is molded in as the first step, and then see if I need less pitch, more pitch. Sanding I like to do with wet and dry sandpaper. Wet. 2 reasons, and I never put my finger up there. I just let the sandpaper do the work. I'm just using that as a tool, because I'm real conscious of getting splinters under my fingernails and things like that. You can see how quick the material comes off. Another trick here is if you want to maintain that good balance, is do 100 swipes on each blade, or you can just go rebalance the prop. But it doesn't take long. Step is to take some 600, and what I like to do, put a little bit of soap on it even. And I use, this is a good way to avoid getting splinters. Always have the sandpaper crease facing your finger. Now when I do that side, I'm actually sanding, and this is just putting a smooth finish on, and I'm keeping a radius on that. Now I want to turn it over and do the same thing to the leading edge. Again, you can buy props from Bill Lee. dentist toth that are already, they're molded, but they don't do any of the handwork. So in essence, you can kind of custom. Now we could make a prop, and we have plenty of prop videos. A video on putting some Phillips entry in, changing a pitch, all of those type of things. But for right now, we just like to get these a ballpark flight or two on a plane when it comes time to try the two blades. See if there's going to be any advantage in the fact that they are significantly lighter. Let's see what this looks like even after this. And you get a real nice finish with that. And you could even take some 1200 on that. And the main thing is keep all the edges smooth that you don't get any splinters on them. Boy, nothing worse than a splinter under your fingernail, and I have had my share. And anytime you sand carbon fiber wet, you don't have to breathe the dust. I'm satisfied with the finish. And I just need it to be rough because we're going to work on these props. This is a thing I've found real handy, is plug in the tool. Always works better that way. I want to serrate all the surfaces that are going to touch. It's either the spinner or the motor crankshaft. And what I do is I put my own number on each one so I know which is which. In this case I'll have 3 that are roughly the same, but I'll have a number on each one. Usually do, and it's the final step of any prop, storage. It's the time of year I take out, and we're getting ready to fly this weekend. I don't care what happens. I'm going to kick these people off the field. What I want to do is get together all my props, make sure each one is balanced. In this case, I'm putting I got 4 of these. In fact, I got 5 of them. I got 6 of them. I don't even know how many I have because people borrow this stuff and don't give them back. Typically, I like to put the biggest props at the back, but not always. And we have some of these real tricky ones, if you've never seen these, that have the vortex tip. Wayne's made those. And we're really hoping Wayne is going to be able to make me a carbon fiber gas tank to complement Joe, a wonderful one Joe made. Boy, that was a piece of artwork. So we have all the props, and this is what I do is when it's time to put them in the toolbox, keep them in some kind of storage so they don't get chewed up. They're all balanced. Sounds like Mike just fell off the ladder out there. Boy, if you only knew what a hassle it was putting this roof on the house. So we have a lot of Dennis's props, and I have a lot of faith in them because I've used them for the last couple of years. Used them on a Spitfire at the Nats. An excellent choice. And then what I do, I take a rubber band on this. It's a good way to store them. They don't get dinged up as bad as if you just leave them. And that should get us flying. We have 2 blades, 3 blades, no blades, broken rubber bands. A couple of weeks from now, we'll be at Brodax. We'll be videotaping a Brodax meet. There's nothing better than the feeling of having all the props balanced, all clean, ready to go in the toolbox, ready for that first flight. Now what I did in the remaining time, I tried to clean this up a little bit. The balance point, I took some clay, some modeling clay, put it inside the fuselage, took all that solder off the tail wheel for the balance point. There's a couple other little detail items here that I really, I want to put real tape on the hinge lines. Things like that, just to get it ready. Put a nice coat of wax on it. It's already been waxed. What am I say? I don't even remember if I waxed it or not. But we are basically ready. Boy, I wish I could calculate how many hours I've put into this project. It seems like I've put a lot of hours. Well, really excited about it though. In case that carbon fiber fuselage self-destructs, we have a wood one. We have a spare carbon one. We got some new unique Stinger parts that we're making up, a special pipe for Ken Claps in there, some special stuff. Made 2 more unique tune pipes with the lower outlet. These are already sold, so they're ready to go. I still need to make myself a couple of spare pipes. But basically she is ready to fly. She's balanced, vertical CG is okay. Everything is certainly within the range of acceptable teenage behavior. Like I said, it's just hard to express how you feel after a project like this comes to fruition. And I hope Danny's going to be able to make it down there for the first flight. That's another thing. I'd really like to help him get his plane in trim. Well, what a beauty that is. We're going to have some semi-scale fly-offs this summer, that's for sure. It's funny, I'm walking out here before. Look at his parts of the roof flying down. Hey, coming through! Look at what he's done to my house. The hell are you guys? Oh no! How's your hand?
Oh,
Dennis, what did he do to himself today?
No, I stuck the screwdriver right through it.
Oh!
That's it. You're a slave driver.
Hey, you want to show your wounds on camera?
This is my last roof.
You gonna go into making carbon tune pipes?
I'm gonna do something, but I'm gonna stop this shit.
You
Numb.
sissy.
It's numb.
Come on,
Numb.
you
Can't touch it.
sissy.
It's
You can't
numb.
touch it?
Oh man, it's numb.
What'd you do, a screwdriver?
Yeah.
God, you didn't take my pipes out of the oven, did you?
Oh no, they're still cooking.
They're cooking. Ooh, I love the smell of cooking pipes.
I took a couple good ones and I
Woo! Oh, they're cooking, baby. They're cooking. Let them cook. So you're okay. The roof's coming out. What do we have to look forward to here? More junk in the dumpster?
Yeah.
Wow. It sounds like Beirut when you guys are hammering away up there. I can't concentrate on my high-tech work.
Keep them on the side for now. Because we're running out of... By them pipes, all that's got to come off and be rebuilt and then sheathed again.
Almost half. Would you say it's fair to say you're half done?
Not yet.
Not yet? A little less than half?
Right. After this side is roofed, then it's maybe half.
It really is. Mike really did hurt himself pretty good. In fact, there's still blood on the table here from bandaging him up. Anyway, I really hope you've enjoyed this video and you're enjoying watching the great adventure. The adventure of Miss Ashley. I don't know how you could have more of an adventure with your life than getting involved in some project like this. All this high-tech roofing going on at the same thing. And we're expecting Elliot here today. Haven't seen Elliot in a while. Should be a good night. We'll fatten him up. Take him for a nice steak dinner. Only one thing better than having a nice production run of tune pipes around here. And that's a slave to make them for you. How's everything going, slave?
Oh, very well.
This is my English slave, manservant here, pipe man. Elliot Scott making up doing the final polishing on some tune pipes he's going to take back to England. That sounds nice. Don't bother oiling the bearings in this thing. Be here for a few days and I'm giving him some, I don't know, some hands-on feeling for working with the carbon. We got some pipes out in the oven cooking already. We got the mandrels laid up, and I want to get him to do the dirty work. Polishing up nice?
Beautiful.
All right, what a guy, what a guy.
You want to have a quick look?
No, I can see it's okay from here. I'm going to go work on some of the other stuff inside. Just keep polishing. That's what slaves do. Yeah, it looks real nice.
It's a good job of one my I'm wearing some nice designer clothes today.
Yes, yes, you've got your Viva la El Bandito shirt on. Yeah, that looks good. So you'll have the nicest looking pipe in England, I hope. Some lucky person in England is going to be flying this pipe before the 2 weeks are out. This is the custom stinger that Rich Jacobone needed to put in his P-51. He needed to have the stinger come out in a very precise location in the back of the scoop. This is a special one we made up for him. Finished this up today. This is the one that's going in. Joe Adamusco's stuntress, he needed a stinger location and an angle that was unique. We finished that one up today while we have Elliot here. It's so nice having a slave to do all the polishing. I love that. I've got to keep him chained to the lathe over there. Beauty's going to Ken Clapson for his new plane. Ken, we put a lot of work into making this back end. I had to make a special back end for this pipe to meet up to your drawing. I hope this is going to work for you. You ready to assemble? Well, I just love having him do all the work. You know what? Being in the pipe business is great as long as you don't have to do the work. I like doing everything but the work. Putting the knurls on the front of the pipes that are going to England. Without those knurls, you run the risk that possibly the pipe could slide off the plane and maybe even hurt somebody. El Bandito. The El Bandito of tuned pipes here. As the last project, while we have our plans man available, Elliot has done all the plans for the Strega kit that's soon to be coming out. And all through the construction of Miss Ashley, I made all these templates of all the actual parts, even the lettering, so that the person that buys the plans, the crutch, the tail, I even made an extra tailpiece, all of the airfoils, all of the shapes, the gear wire, everything that's going to be on the plans, and the plans will be available. Tell us when.
In about a month.
Tonight. Well, it'll be up on a website when they're ready.
Beginning of June.
Take care of Strega first. I don't want to hold Brodak up. We got the real templates of the rudder and everything that we've used to make this kit. And if there's any inaccuracies in the kit, what's your home phone number, Elliot?
Thank you.
Don't see Elliot, see me.
Email WindyU at AOL.
WindyU at AOL.com. No, these are all the ribs, all the spare ribs, the template. I expect this will be the most accurate set of plans ever drawn, assuming this plane flies. It may not fly. We want to just throw this stuff all away. From Elliot's plans, you'll wind up with two possibilities. You can order a carbon fiber fuselage, and very soon, we hope within a year, you'll be able to order a carbon fiber wing. Just hold tight while we try to finish the last of the development and hopefully get a test flight. This has to be one of the funniest things. Elliot is wrapping the plane in bubble wrap. He's going to mail it to England and see if it makes it. You think so?
Oh, yeah. No trouble at all.
Look at this. I never seen anything crazier in my... This is going on Virgin Atlantic then?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Look at this.
They put everything on an ask desk, computer help desk.
This is going in a box now? Once this is filled?
Yep.
Wow. Well, please give me an email if it makes it, or somehow I get the feeling. Craig, you think this is going to make it to England?
I think it'll make it.
To England.
That thing is really.
I think no pieces are going to fall out of that bubble wrap.
Wow.
Bubble wrap's going to contain all the pieces.
Can't make this stuff up. What a way to end the video. You can't believe the poor little cardinal. The little cardinal's in his home going to England. Look at this mess.
We're trying to figure out how many grams of cocaine you can fit in every bubble of the bubble wrap. Playing back and forth. They never look at the wrapping.
Elliot, if this works, we'll all be wealthy. We can smuggle drugs into England. Oh my God! Look at this.
Who would ever look at
Quite an operation.
Right?
This is a team effort. What a way to end the video. Miss Ashley visits England. Look at this. I have never seen. Somehow I think Casminato doesn't do this. Look at all the junk. You know half of this is going to be all over the backyard.
But that's the fun of it.
And as soon as you get to the airport, they're going to say, open that box. We want to check that cardinal out. Is that a real Brodak cardinal? Why, yes, of course it is. If this makes it, we are definitely going to be wealthy. We'll never have to work again. All we need to do is go into drug business. Look at this.
I'm saying, that kicks
That is,
ass.
it's working.
That kicks ass.
The carbon fiber body. Look at how we put the carbon fiber body over here. That's a Miss Ashley fuselage.
Why would they do it?
These English guys are pretty creative. I'll tell you, if only they could keep from dropping cell phones on their wings.
Yeah, but that's the new fashion in Europe, Wendy.
Right.
We've got cellular stunt planes.
Cellular wingtips. You drop the cell phone on your wingtip and use it for tip weight.
Yep.
Invented by Paul Winter.
The land is flat land.
This is unbelievable. What a way. Jimmy, are we taking odds that this will make it yet?
I don't know. I'm going to call you tomorrow.
Nick the Greek is probably going to want to know what the odds are that this package never makes it to England.
This flight number is already on the top of the board in Atlantic City.
Nick the Cardinal. Goodbye, nice Cardinal. Look at that. Look at that. Goodbye, nice Cardinal. We'll see you in London.
I've run out of
There'll be bluebirds over.
Run a newspaper.
Well, at least now there's something
Run
there
a
I can fly. Like
newspaper.
Yeah, we're going to all fly your plane when we come to England.
Did I ever tell you about the guy that swam the English Channel?
No.
Came to beat it. Elliot spent the rest of his life in a British prison for smuggling a cardinal into the country. Oh, man. Elliot, what do you have to say for yourself before we close out this video and go on to something serious?
Very fragile.
Even after all that, it's still very fragile.
You could drive over this with a truck and it would be fine.
I still like the idea, like where you have like the pallet, like that too. Oh, what it is? What it
Come on, get out of the way. Get out of the way so I can see what you wrote.
You gotta see the other side too.
Now, which should we put my address one side and your address the other side? They can just make up their mind.
Use Brodak's address so if we get caught smuggling drugs, they put him in jail. John? Hey.
John supplied the dope.
Buzz? Yeah. Buzz, hey. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you on the next video. I don't know if these guys are qualified to be shooting video.
It's all about that red. That red is kind of all right, isn't it? I can see these guys in his airplane if they landed thing and say, hey Joe, you want to buy an airplane? About it. While it's just sitting here, let's at least land the other way.
Yeah, don't get it near the pond. I think it's going to fly into the pond with the wind blowing.
Lay it down. Lay it down this way.
It's the 20 years in an English prison at hard labor or making Wendy's tune pipes, one or the other. Oh, man.
Most than that, he's committing himself to a life in the United States.
Wow, that is torture.